Hey guys, Argent here. So let's talk about The Hunchback of Notredame. Probably by far my favorite Disney movie. If I had to pick my top three, I'd probably pick Hercules, this, and Beauty and the Beast. I have the Hercules review done, I just haven't posted it yet. Hunchback was one I missed as a kid. Largely, I just wasn't that interested in that kind of thing back then. I was a dumb kid. I didn't like Beauty and the Beast much back in the day. I'm like, oh, this is lame, romantic, girly stuff. You know how it is. Hercules had all the flash. Aladdin had sword fights and stuff like that. It had exotic locations. Atlantis had all kind of like the neat steampunk stuff. But Hunchback is a different beast entirely. And it makes sense that it was made by the same people who made Beauty and the Beast and The Little Mermaid, as they're a lot more deep. They touch something a lot deeper in the human psyche. And they really deal with more complicated issues in a more adult way than most of the Disney films did. I only watched it. My friend Abstract showed me it a couple years ago in university, and I was utterly shocked by it. Just how good it was, and just how what an incredible movie it was. The title of this is probably going to be "Frollo Did Nothing Wrong," and to some extent that's true. Frollo is really one of the Disney characters I identify the most with, and we'll get into that, and I'll probably do a character profile just on Frollo. But he's actually a Disney villain who has a very complicated set of motivations. He's also a Disney villain who views himself as doing the right thing. Whereas most Disney villains will sing about how evil they are and talk about their dark cosmic powers or whatever, Frollo believes that he is doing God's work. The question is he doing God's work? Because as the film begins, we get the impression that he is the root of all evil. But as it goes on and on and on, even as Frollo descends into madness, he's more or less continually proven right. His cynicism, I kind of view him and Quasimodo as kind of being two sides of the same coin in truth. Quasimodo is a character who's completely given over to idealism, and Frollo is a character who's completely given over to cynicism, to the point that he detests humanity and wants to basically destroy it for its sins. Whereas Quasimodo has an extremely idealized view of humanity. But it is the deepest Disney film. It is the most complicated Disney film. So let's just go right into it. So we open in 15th century Paris. Clopin, a gypsy puppeteer, narrates the origin of the titular hunchback. A group of gypsies sneak illegally into Paris but are ambushed by Judge Claude Frollo, the Minister of Justice. From what I was able to look up, Minister of Justice is pretty much the same as it is now. It's kind of like the Attorney General, but also a minister position. In this movie, it seems like the King of France is off doing something, and Frollo's basically in charge of Paris. So he's in charge of the city guard, he's in charge of meting out justice, he's in charge of judging capital crimes, that kind of thing. Basically kind of like a modern attorney general, but without a democratic oversight. So let's see here. So a gypsy woman in the group attempts to flee with her deformed baby, but Frollo chases and kills her outside Notredame. He attempts to kill the baby as well, but the cathedral's archdeacon intervenes and accuses Frollo of murdering an innocent woman. To atone for his sin, Frollo reluctantly agrees to raise the deformed child in Notredame as his son, naming him Quasimodo, which I believe means hunchback or deformed. Now the scene is quite interesting. Frollo comes across the young Quasimodo, and he believes it, as was common at that time, to believe that it was a sign of the devil. That to have a deformed child meant that the devil had possessed it. And it's kind of interesting, because before we understand genetics, to some extent this makes sense. I believe Quasimodo's condition is probably inheritable. So there is a strong chance that his children could be like that, and their children's children could be like that. And without really any understanding of how genetics work, or that it has a physical cause, it's not that crazy to think that Quasimodo is possessed by a demon, at least at his childhood. Besides that, gypsies are well known to consort with spirits and stuff. And that's not just Frollo's Catholicism talking. That's kind of how gypsies are. They're always involved with weird magical stuff. So Frollo agrees to raise him as the penance of sorts. Now, it should be noted, Frollo's character, that Frollo is actually morally torn up about this. The Archdeacon does succeed in guilting him, which is something we don't see many Disney villains do. Frollo is guilted by the Archdeacon into to basically raising the child. He raises the child in Notredame, though, confining him to the admittedly huge bell tower. I've been there. It's nowhere near that big in real life, but in the movie, it's bigger than the houses most people live in. And people say, well, Frollo's an evil man because he keeps Quasimodo locked up in there. At the same time, though, it appears that he goes there every day, tries to teach Quasimodo to read at a time when virtually no one was literate. He brings him delicacies like grapes, good cheese, bread, wine, that sort of thing, and gives him a useful job to do. True, Quasimodo's alone, but his lot, aside from the isolation, is better than the lot of 95% of the French population during this period. As you can see from him being a big guy, he's well fed. He's educated. He has all kinds of like tools. It seems that Frollo's taught him to make things, that kind of thing. So I think it's pretty interesting because we see Frollo as kind of being cold and bitter. At the same time, though, he is basically a cop. He spent the last 20 years or so dealing with that sort of thing. And to become jaded after meting out justice and executing murderers does tend to have that effect on someone. So, yes, so Quasimodo has 3 gargoyles which he talks to. After he kind of speaks to Frollo, he tells Frollo that he wishes to attend the Festival of Fools, which is held every year outside of Notredame, which everyone gets dressed up, there's a big festival, etc. And Quasimodo wants to go there because he says it's the only place where he could be considered normal. Frollo states that Quasimodo has no idea what he's talking about. He tells him that the world is an evil place filled with sin and that no one will ever accept him. Time would only serve to prove Frollo completely right at this. So Frollo goes to the festival and is celebrated for his awkward appearance, only to be humiliated by the crowd after Frollo's men start a riot. So the crowd suddenly turns on Quasimodo and begins to tie him up and torture him and beat him. Frollo is unwilling to really do anything to help because Quasimodo disobeyed his orders, and he feels that his adopted son needs to learn a lesson about what men are really like. Now, it's interesting that Frollo doesn't seem to consider Quasi a demon anymore now that he's grown up. Embarrassing, perhaps, but the fact that he states that the people won't accept him seems to indicate that Frollo's realized that his son is kind-hearted. Enter Phoebus and Esmeralda. Phoebus is a crusader coming home from, the Crusades, and he immediately is made captain of the guards of Paris because of his military stature. We also enter Esmeralda, who is a gypsy, a rather curvaceous gypsy, who shows up at the Festival of Fools and begins to dance in an extremely provocative way. Frollo, being horny and apparently not being married because he spent all those time devoted to justice, gets extremely aroused. After Esmeralda performs a couple magic tricks and frees Quasi from the the whatchamacallit, the bindings, and attacks and publicly humiliates Frollo. Frollo sends his men to arrest her, but she makes it inside of Notredame and asks for sanctuary. Apparently, it's a rule during the medieval era that if you ask for sanctuary at a church, you can't be arrested until you leave the church. And I have actually heard about this. It happened a lot in the Eastern Empire. In Byzantium, it was fairly common. If in Game of Thrones you have Take the Black, that actually has a lot of historical precedent. It was not uncommon because it's unseemly to spill royal blood or to kill a member of your family. So what would often happen is a rival family member would be imposed on to take the cloth, to become a monk or a nun or something, and to move elsewhere. So, let's see here. So, Esmeralda is confined to the cathedral. Esmeralda finds and befriends Quasi, who helps her escape Notredame out of gratitude for defending him. She entrusts Quasimodo with a pendant containing the map of the gypsies' hideout, the Court of Miracles. Now, it's around this time that Quasimodo has fallen in love with Esmeralda. Frollo basically views Esmeralda as being a demonic figure. She's a lusty woman who uses her sexuality to get what she wants. And in essence, that's kind of true. She basically uses her sexuality to manipulate Quasimodo into helping her escape, which is setting up for a permanent break between him and his father. Now you could say, well, Frollo's a dick, and Frollo is a dick, but he also did feed and clothe Quasi for the last 20 years. You think Quasi would have a little more loyalty. But no, much like Frollo, he immediately falls in love with Esmeralda. Well, in his case, it's more kind of innocent puppy love, and in Frollo's case, it's more kind of disturbing lust. And he helps her escape. Phoebus is also in love with Esmeralda for more or less the same reason. We then have the most climatic scene probably in Disney history, Hellfire, in which Frollo begs the Virgin Mary to protect him. Bear in mind, Notredame means Our Lady. He begs her, he says, "Bless me, Maria, please protect me from the siren," etc. However, you can clearly see that a lifetime of repression, of repressing his own desires to sin, his own evil, has finally caught up with Frollo. To a sense, his extreme Puritanism has made him extremely vulnerable. His age, his kind of dedication to his cause and his forsaking of everything else has left him in many regards a shell of a man. And for what seems to be the first time in his life, Frollo decides to do something purely selfish. Now, I say selfish, and people say, well, Frollo is he wants to slaughter the gypsies. He wants to arrest the gypsies. He's an evil man. Well, gypsies are nothing to really defend. People say, well, the gypsies are that way because people hate them. Yeah, but there's a lot of reasons people hate gypsies. They steal children. That's not like a myth. They beg for money. They do things like get leprosy, which is a curable disease, and they let it rot them so that they can beg for money. They beg with fake babies. They get like fake babies and they go beg with those. They steal stuff, like I said. They pickpocket. They run scams. They're like a menace in whatever country they're in, and Frollo just really doesn't want to have to put up with it. I know if you go to Europe, at least before the Africans showed up, in most European cities you just have gypsies there, stealing from people and just being a general social nuisance. So you can say that, but is that really because of Frollo? Like, how does that benefit Frollo? Personally, his crusade against the gypsies, it doesn't. It may be a fulfillment of an ideological tenet, but there's no real, there's nothing to suggest to me personally that Frollo has done anything that would be considered corrupt. I can't see him embezzling money. I can't see him, given his lust for Esmeralda, using his position to rape women, etc. I guess the only thing he's really guilty of is being overzealous. So a lifetime of avoiding every type of temptation has made him susceptible, and he has begun to unravel. Upon learning that Esmeralda has escaped and realizing that his son has betrayed him, Frollo goes completely insane and starts burning down Paris and killing people to try and find her. Phoebus finds out about this, the Crusader guy, and defies Frollo, who sentences him to death. Phoebus is struck by an arrow and falls into the river Seine, but Esmeralda rescues him and takes him to Notredame for refuge. The gargoyles encourage Quasimodo to confess his feelings for Esmeralda, but he's heartbroken to discover she and Phoebus have fallen in love. So let's look at this for a second. So Quasi ruined the relationship with his father figure for this girl. He saved her life. She doesn't even give him the time of day. She was nice to him. She flirted with him. But now she just completely ignores him and abandons him for Phoebus, who doesn't really have much of a personality, but is good looking. And so this is kind of how we have Quasi and Frollo as kind of two sides of the same coin. They both fail to get the same thing. Their reasonings may be a bit different, but they both fail. And Frollo is more or less proven right. Esmeralda is a temptress. She does use her feminine wiles to get what she wants. In this case, she kind of recklessly destroys Quasi's life with no real concern for the amount of devastation she does to it. Phoebus is just kind of generic. He's kind of a generic Disney villain, and he's there as to be that way, to show that Quasi is this intelligent, creative, loving, wonderful soul of a human, but no one will give him the time of day. So Frollo returns to Notredame that night and discovers that Quasi helped Esmeralda escape. He bluffs to Quasi, saying that he knows about the Court of Miracles and intends to attack at dawn. Using the map Esmeralda gave him, Quasi and Phoebus find the court to warn the gypsies, only for Frollo to follow them and capture all the gypsies present. Frollo prepares to burn Esmeralda at the stake after she rejects his advances. He literally says, well, you can be my mistress or I'll burn you. But Quasimodo rescues her and brings her to the cathedral. Phoebus releases the gypsies and rallies the citizens of Paris against Frollo and his men who try to break into the cathedral. Quasimodo and the gargoyles and the gypsies, etc., defend the cathedral against them, but Frollo successfully manages to enter. He pursues Quasimodo and Esmeralda to the balcony, where he and Quasimodo both fall over the edge. Frollo falls to his death in the molten copper below in an extremely disturbing scene. He's like holding onto a gargoyle and it breaks off. And he flies downward with this gargoyle like pinning him down into a sea of molten metal. So it's really this disturbing hell-like imagery. Quasimodo is caught in time by Phoebus on the lower floor. Afterwards, Quasimodo comes to accept that Phoebus and Esmeralda are in love and gives them his blessing. The two encourage him to leave the cathedral into the outside world, where the citizens hail him as a hero and accept him into society. So what can we say about this? That there's some truth to that. At the same time, though, is their acceptance really permanent, or is it just this temporary thing? Is it just this well, he's the hero of the moment, because he was the hero of the moment earlier, and then they started trying to kill him. These are fickle people. Quasi I just kind of view as a naive idealist who doesn't really understand the world and is unwilling to accept the harshness of it. At the same time, Frollo is a hardcore cynic who's completely incapable of accepting any sort of supporting any sort of compromise or reality. He's just a complete and utter cynic. And to a certain extent, they're both idealists. They're both idealists in different directions. They're kind of two halves of one soul that, if combined, would truly be great. And that's why they're kind of both likable and relatable characters. Because everything Frollo said is true. Like, when they go to the Court of Miracles, the gypsies try to have them executed. Like, they have a song there, and it's like, it's a miracle if you get out alive. So the gypsies are pretty much confirmed in the movie to be lying, murdering, child snatching thieves. So was Frollo really bad in trying to get rid of them to keep them out of Paris? Um, was Frollo really wrong about women, particularly Esmeralda, being a witch who seduces men with her beauty and controls them? Was he really wrong about the way that society treat Quasi, etc.? People don't like him because he's Christian. People don't like him because he's right wing. People don't like him because he's an old white male. At the same time, though, he did more for Quasi than anyone else had, and he did more for the French nation and for the capital city than anyone else in this movie ever has. So I leave you with this: Frollo did nothing wrong until a gypsy basically led to his unfortunate downfall. Don't worry, Frollo. We have your back. This is Argent Templar, signing out.